Welcome to What's My Thesis? I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is John O'Connor in New York, not New York City. What city are you in?
It's technically Mohegan Lake. It's right near Peekskill, which maybe people would know.
One of the things that I'm curious about is kind of what goes on art wise there, and I see you're pretty active out in that part of the world. Can you give us a little insight into like what's your relationship with the city itself and that, and then like is there stuff more going on locally with where you are?
Yeah, not much happening. Not too much happening around here where I am. I came to the city to go to graduate school. So back, I was from Massachusetts originally, and then moved to Brooklyn. I went to Pratt back in
Okay.
the late '90s, and so um, and then I lived. So I lived. Went to school there, lived there through about 2000, and then moved to Queens and lived in Queens for about 10 years or so. And then my family moved up here. So we're about an hour outside of the city. So I actually get into the city quite often, but around here it's more of sort of a suburb. But it's quieter and there's a little bit more space. And,
I can see the green out your window.
oh, that's
Uh,
true. Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
And
Well,
our
then it
jobs,
was.
we also have other, I mean, I teach as well. So it's closer to here.
Do you teach art?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where at? Where at?
It's called Sarah Lawrence College.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Super famous. Yeah, yeah.
really?
Uh,
Oh, okay.
Sarah Lawrence. Yeah. I mean, it is like kind of the punchline in a lot of like old school comedy, or old
Yeah.
school like, oh, you're
Certain
going
type.
to a liberal arts. Yeah, it's definitely got its stereotype stigma attached to it, but I don't necessarily believe all of that hype when I hear stuff like that. So anyway, but it,
Yeah.
it definitely is one of those places. um well, okay, cool. Well then, so you said you went to Pratt. When did you get started with the idea that you were an artist before that? Like, what made you? Because that's a big decision to go. I don't know how much debt you got into it. It seems the longer you wait to go to school, the more expensive it gets. So
Yeah.
I don't
Definitely.
necessarily want to put it on you that you like are in its ridiculous amount of debt, but it's still a big decision to be like, this is going to be my career.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that my student loans were just erased. So
Oh,
wiped them.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow,
that's
wow,
good.
wow.
But I still had them, which, so that really, hit close to home when you said that. But yeah, I think growing up, I don't know about you, but I drew all the time. I really loved to draw. It was like, I don't know, it was kind of like a private thing. I mean, I did it in school, but I didn't
Mhm.
really, I drew like comic books, I drew caricatures, I drew sort of like, things out of my head, and had always sort of drew as a way to kind of just be in my own world, and to sort of separate from like school and do things that it was purely for myself. And I think then,
Interesting. So
yeah, yeah,
it wasn't a thing that people like were encouraging you. You weren't like necessarily showing for validation kind of thing. It was more for
yeah.
you.
I think, well, yeah, I did. I mean, I did show people when I remember drawing a sneaker, somebody's
Uh-huh.
sneaker in like maybe sixth grade or something like that. And everybody liked it. So I
Oh,
was like,
nice.
oh, I'll draw more sneakers.
Okay.
And I think that sort of like encouragement was something that I liked, because it was something I could do at least, fairly well. Um, but then, yeah, kind of like thought it would be, it's more important to get a job and to go in. When I went to college, I was playing music and making art, but not really thinking seriously about being an artist, like a fine artist. I went for graphic design. And
Mm.
actually, in undergrad, I had a few different majors, sort of thinking like, what could I do for a job? Um,
What are the majors? This is always interesting.
yeah, I was a
Alternate.
math major for a little while.
You're
For
not the
like,
first one. You're not
yeah,
the
yeah.
first.
Was that you too, or no? Yeah.
No,
No,
it always surprises me when an artist is good at math.
I don't think I
It
was that
seems.
good at it. Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay. You
liked it.
just
I
liked
don't
it.
know. I mean, I think I thought I enjoyed it. But I didn't think it was something I wanted to keep doing, for a long
Okay.
time. I was a psych major, and then I did a psych minor, and then I took an art class, like a design class, and just thought this is the thing that I really like. I loved it. I loved putting time into it, and I thought this is what I really want to do. And then I majored in graphic design. I painted on the side, um, and thought, well, I'll get a job as a. I was also at the same time, I all through even through the end of high school and through college, I was working as like a cook in a hospital, so in a like
Oh
a
wow.
dishwasher. So I did that sort of as a full time job, and then did art classes to kind of, I wanted to do something career wise. I thought so. I thought I'd go into graphic design, and then it just didn't. Yeah, I think we even chatted about this a little bit, didn't we? Or no, did we not before?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes everything just becomes a blur, especially this show.
yeah,
you, there's times where I'm trying to remember who said something, and I'm like,
yeah. Or I
oh,
heard you say something like that before. I'm having a
yeah,
deja vu now.
yeah.
Probably
Uh,
wasn't since we never met, but
but
anyway, yeah. Then yeah, go ahead.
we've exchanged back and forth.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not like we haven't had any contact. Well, I feel like I maybe cut you off a little bit. You were gonna say something. No, okay.
Oh,
Then
I don't know. Maybe.
well, sometimes that happens. I always catch myself in the middle of doing it, and I'm like, bad Javier. But
Yeah.
okay. So then, what? So you're in the Bronx, right? That was for your MFA. The
Brooklyn. Yeah. Pratt. It's called Pratt Institute, so it's in Brooklyn.
Pratt. Sorry,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
in
No, no
Brooklyn.
problem.
Yeah, like goes to show. I don't even know the geographic uh,
That's cool. That's right. Yeah.
layout of the boroughs, so this is gonna
Yep.
be fun for me.
Yeah.
New Yorkers are gonna hate me though. So, but okay. So then, tell me, like, what era was this? Like, what was this? Was like when were you at Pratt in Brooklyn, and had it become like the hipster mecca that it is has the reputation of being now? Yet, I
Yeah.
also
I don't
know
think
it's
I
like,
had. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
and so at the time it was like mostly Polish, right? A neighborhood, or
Well,
is
yeah.
that?
So not the neighborhood that I was. So it Pratt was in the like Clinton Hill,
Mhm,
Fort Greene neighborhood, and it was not a. I don't remember. I don't recall it being like particularly Polish neighborhood. I think you're thinking maybe
mhm.
like Williamsburg, which
Okay.
um, I did. So yeah, so the Pratt part was like I think I went to school in '97, so it was a long time ago.
Mhm,
Graduated in 2001, and then so that neighborhood I really liked, but then I there was a lot happening in Williamsburg, which was very
mhm,
different than it is now. So I started showing with the gallery in Williamsburg in like 2003. And I think there were some zoning laws that had changed, if I remember right. So then the development people, a lot of artists were living in that area,
mhm.
but there wasn't a lot. There weren't a lot of the development was not what it is today. It was
Yeah, yeah.
it was very different. Like certain industries were still there, and yeah, there was like I remember just there was nobody on the streets at night. It was very quiet.
Had
But now
Times
it's
Square's
totally exploded. So yeah,
had Times Square's already Square already become Disneyfied at that point? Because I mean, 1990s.
probably.
Yeah, it was
I
starting.
think so.
It was peeking into that realm.
Yeah,
It was no longer the 70s grungy like Velvet Underground kind of vibe.
in Times Square, I don't think it was. No, I remember going there and thinking it was really overstimulating and really like a totally different world. Yeah,
Because it
um,
used to all be peep shows, right, or something like that. I don't.
I I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, or
right.
a
Like
lot of them
that's.
at least. Yeah, yeah.
It
I
was
wasn't
like
there. Go ahead.
it
Sorry.
wasn't a corporate mecca. Oh, don't worry. It's always hard to like on Zoom because of the cutting each other off. But cool. Well, then tell me a little bit about your work. You said you started. You used to draw comics. Was there ever a desire to be a comic book artist? Because I mean that in terms of like pragmatic jobs, I know as an adult now knowing what how difficult the comics industry is probably not a thing.
Yeah.
But as a kid, it probably seems like a reasonable job. Did that ever become a consideration? I mean, because '97, that's you were already doing fine art then, but that's like when Image Comics and all of that was sort of at its heyday, right? So it's interesting to me. Like what were you reading? What kind of comics were you into?
I mean, my friends and I, when we were younger, we collected all, like superhero stuff and things like that. So I would learn how to draw, like Spider-Man or something, and try to sort of mimic those, and thought that that would be it seems like you could be creative and you could draw things that were cool, but it was a job. It seemed like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I thought I would go into that. I also loved caricatures. I don't know what I thought I would do, like become a
Just
caricature artist or maybe a comic that could do like stuff like that. Yeah, I remember drawing like the Boston Celtics, and like I think I copied what was at the time like someone had done a caricature of them, like a whole team,
yeah.
and I was super into it, and I really like spent all this time drawing it, and thought I'll like practice sort of copying those things. But I do
Mhm.
remember that actually then it was in the basement of my parents' house, and something happened with the pipes, and it leaked, and it like destroyed the drawing. So I remember being devastated that
Wow, yeah.
this thing I put all this time into was totally destroyed. I tried to redraw it, but never could like get it back to where I thought it was as good. Yeah, I thought that, and I thought graphic design. So I did that in college thing, and I tried doing it a little bit when I got out of school, but it just never really like clicked for me. I never found like there were enough jobs or that it was interesting enough. So,
Yeah.
and I loved making, painting, and I love drawing. And I thought, what could I do with this? And so then I decided I think it was a couple of years between undergrad and grad school, but then I decided to apply to graduate schools. I did a residency in Vermont, which was great. But then I didn't get into any grad schools the first year. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do after that. Um, it was like a whole thing about how I didn't even really know how to, I don't know about you, but I didn't know that world at all. Like I liked painting, and I'd seen things in art history class, but really never went to museums or saw artwork that I could respond to. I didn't really even know how to document my work for an application.
Really.
I photographed I remember I didn't get into UMass for their grad program, and I called the chair to make an appointment to sort of see what he could give me feedback. And I remember he was like, "Well, you need really good images of your artwork, and you can't have your paintings leaning against your car." I was like, oh. Like I had no idea, and they were like, I had to have him laying in the grass, and he was. I remember I had no idea that you had to like block out the rest of the artwork.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah. So he's like, first you should get rid of your car, and then make. So then I hired my neighbor wedding photographer, and he like shot. Anyway, this is all boring
No,
initial
this
stuff.
is interesting though because like it's like what I love about and I always start with origins because it's always interesting to me. Like nobody, it's not an innate knowledge,
Yeah.
and like you said, like I've been doing the podcast for like 6 years. What I know now, just from talking to people, compared to like what I knew when I first started, I didn't know anybody in LA. I was just so in the
Huh.
dark. So it really is interesting to me how people piece together this identity because like there's look, it's burdensome to be an artist, right? Like it's not we we started off by talking about how you thought you would make money from
Yeah.
these skills, these art skills, right? And like and none of your first thoughts were like, "Oh, I'm going to be an artist." They were all graphic design and stuff like that, which is a pressure that I'm sure a lot of people feel too, right? Like it's like, "Yeah, I love this thing." Even people that maybe are more informed with what art is than we were.
Hmm.
I was lucky, but I didn't. When I came into it, when I first started art school, my concept of art was all European based. I really
Hmm.
didn't understand. Like I knew a little bit about. I don't know. Postmodernism was not innately understood until I went to school. Like until I got my BFA, because I was definitely very much into, virtuoso, technical
Hmm.
abilities that I grew up with, and so yeah, it's always interesting how people find their place, and I think it informs what kind of work people do. So that's why I like to start there. But so like,
Yeah.
what? So you're a painter, right? That's how you identify, or do you work
Yeah.
in other media?
Maybe more drawing, I guess. Yeah.
Drawing. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah. Yeah.
then I think we're pretty much on the same thing because drawing for me was also the first one, and I'm kind of losing my eyesight right now, so I can't draw plein
You
air.
are? Oh no.
I
Oh
mean,
wow.
in up close, so I can't. The transition from like looking at the paper to like looking far away is
Uh
a
huh.
struggle for me. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
so then can you tell me about like what interests you? Like what they say that every artist only makes one work
Oh yeah.
in various iterations. I don't know how willing I am to accept that, but sometimes I do see that. What is that one piece that you're trying to express? That
Oh,
that
that's
that
a tough one. Yeah.
well, what
Um,
what what are you interested in like in painting of? Do you do representational? Are you more abstract?
yeah, it's more abstract. It's changed over the years, but language based or systems based. I sort of think of, and I guess that's partly interesting why, I don't know, because you're still drawing, it seems like a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. I
you
was
paint
drawing
as
last
well.
night.
Yeah.
I identify as a conceptual artist, and then I started
Oh,
painting, and I'm having so much fun painting. I can see myself staying here for a while, but
yeah.
I do have other things, and also like painting's a lot easier than to sell than like a random installation, right? So I'm
Yeah, yeah,
definitely
totally.
I'm definitely I would not say I'm selling out, but I am thinking more commercially. As I get a little bit farther away from the academic institutional concepts of what purity means,
Hmm.
what is art when it doesn't exist as a part of a market, and then more thinking in terms of like, well, why is the market bad? The market, going back to like my early education, if I think about like um you know painters and stuff like that, they had to conform to what the market wanted, and a lot of them ended up painting. I'm sure there were people that painted things that had nothing to do with religion that didn't get any heat back then,
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
not what was happening in the time. In that sense, I think it becomes interesting to like the market is a way of being of the time in a certain specific way, right? And I feel like I had a guy named Skip Snow on the show, and he was saying that like it's really hard to do meaningful stuff if you're not part of that, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, or if you're not part of that dialogue. So I mean, how valid that is, I don't know, but I am definitely thinking in those terms a little bit more. But
Hmm.
so when you say systems, are you familiar with Chana Horowitz?
No.
She's a California artist. She was in a Made in LA a few years back, and that really, but it's a lot of coded informational things. I find that it's interesting. Abstract artists tend to have to come up with systems. So I'm curious about what you mean. Are you writing down Shanna Horowitz?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll take a look at her work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm a huge fan, and on this podcast, I've tried to remember her name before and I couldn't, so that's why I
Oh,
dropped it
nice.
now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I do that all the
yeah.
time. Yeah,
So
yeah,
go ahead, tell me a little bit about what we're working with here.
yeah. And I also just co-curated. It just closed a show. It was at Pratt Manhattan Gallery, so
Oh,
in
nice.
Manhattan. Yeah, about sort of the ideas. A friend of mine and I we co-curated it together, but sort of coming from Alfred Jensen's work a little bit.
Okay.
So a lot of the artists didn't directly. It wasn't about systems necessarily, but it had artists that had these external things that they were trying to explore, not necessarily how they looked, but how maybe they operated and then infuse that into their work. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's something that I'm really interested in. Like I think, and also maybe it's connected to what you were talking about with drawing. I did paint and did other things. I've done other things and still work in other ways, but drawing's always felt like really more, I guess, kind of closer to like thinking, like or diagramming or writing, and so it's a like I sort of have these large pieces that I have a couple up on the wall right now. So like
Oh, nice.
really large drawings that I can just kind of work on as if they're like I don't sketch them or plan them out, but allow the drawing to kind of like have all of my thoughts as it develops, and then to also have its final state as I kind of render it more graphically or visually, in existing at the same time, which I'm sort of interested in, and I think drawing, I don't know, I felt like drawing does that in a way that other mediums hadn't for me, Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm going off on the drawing part of it, but I think that a lot of artists would use it as a preparatory or like a certain role in their practice for
Yeah.
me, it just became, for a while, I thought I should make paintings because people would always tell me to make paintings because they're going to sell for more. They're more, it's sort of the, the height, the sort of apex of the art world. And I don't, yeah, I just never wanted, I just love the drawing part of it. So, um,
Yeah.
you know, anyway,
I
I
I,
can,
I had
yeah.
a I had a teacher that that also uh, instilled that idea in me. For me, having identifying more as a conceptual artist, it's hard with like conceptual practice is hard to really sort of quantify sometimes because there's a lot of just thinking. And I've always found that as a basis drawing, whether or not I'm doing it actively or not, is always the more practice based. So, like, if
Mm,
I feel like I've kind of completely removed myself from having a practice and like an actual discipline, I guess would be the other way, right? Like a discipline practice, because I'm always thinking about art. I mean, who isn't, right? Especially if you're an artist. But yeah, like it makes like even yes, I've been drawing on my sketchbook since I'm out here. I can't really do continue the work that I've been doing. It's a little bit trickier. I'm at my grandmother's house on her amazing chair. I just
yeah, I
want to
was
keep
wondering where
building
you
this.
were. Yeah, that's cool. And
uh,
the sort of, what is it behind you? All the, it's
Oh
like,
yeah, it's all the trinkets. It's
that's
all
cool.
her. It's her curio cabinet.
I
Um,
love it.
but yeah, but like it is a problem solving thing too, especially when you're doing abstraction. Like I used to be very proud of my plein air drawing ability. I studied in Florence for a while, and it was just so
Mm,
stimulating to just sit on a balcony and draw everything.
yeah,
All the angles and all the rooftops and all of that,
totally.
and that was like it was just so invigorating. And I was like, oh, I can do this, and even if it looks a little off, and then I got really into like this is how much of a drawer I am. I got into committing to working strictly on pen plein air, right?
Really?
So
Wow.
yeah, so you just kind of go with the marks you make. You have to think about the mark you make before you make it and stuff like that. But the stuff that I'm doing now is more in that abstract vein of like you have these canons, or like I've come up with sort of this like it's like an architectural-ish kind of pattern that repeats. So
Mm,
it's rhythmic. It's also object based, right? But there's a lot of decision making and how all these pieces flow together and all of that. And man, it's exhausting too. Like
yeah.
when you are going from like the drawing's always about decoding, right? Like or coding. You're taking
Cool.
something
Yeah.
and you're making a code to represent it, right? And then
Hmm.
when you do that, but then when you start going into abstraction and stuff, and you're like you said, you're not abstracting an object, right? You're taking an idea and you're codifying it in a certain way or a sense or a feeling.
Hmm.
That's what I'm really interested in now, like,
Hmm.
and I came to that because um, I was just very frustrated with the fact that I could describe all of my art pieces and people would get it without, because they were the conceptual conceit was so heavy that it
Huh.
was like almost like too analytical. And I could be like, oh, it does this, this, and this. And people like, I get it. And it was like a
Yeah.
punchline. It was a joke set up in punchline, and
That's
then
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so now I'm back in drawing because I just like this like ambiguous sort of like, yeah, I'm doing something, but I don't really know what it is. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that. So when you're saying systems, I like the idea. So you're not like abstraction being like traditionally the way that it was taught to me is more of a thing that you do with you're like taking the elements of a chair and then you break them
Yeah.
down into the visual elements, and you abstract the chair. Are you working in that vein, or are you more working when you say systems? It makes me think that you're more thinking in abstract concepts and representing them. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I
I,
think.
I ask obviously because I've seen some of your work
Yeah. Yeah.
as
Yeah. No,
well.
totally. It's funny because when I first saw abstraction, it was in an art history class, and I, didn't. I mean, I think it was Pollock and some of the abstract expressionists, and like,
Hmm.
who in the world would make something like that? I didn't know how and why you would make a piece that didn't look like something that already existed. you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really fascinating because it was like this new language that I wanted to figure out, and so I started to kind of copy those things or try to work in, the style of those artists. And I remember trying to abstract from life, like you're describing, from a figure. So I would take figure drawings from class and then like abstract them. But something about it never really, it just, I guess there was a certain point at which it felt like I needed something else to be driving the sort of abstraction rather than just the visual part. So might
Yeah.
have been when I sort of, yeah, I mean, I don't know where it came from exactly, but it made me think when I sort of saw John Cage's work for the first time, saw Cage's prints, and I didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
how they were made. I loved the way they looked, like they were beautiful. And then when I actually researched like how he made them, then I realized there's this very elaborate, process system behind it. And I thought, well, you could have both of these things. It could be sort of talking to or pulling in some sort of process that exists outside of the artwork, but then it can affect the artwork in a way that still creates this like image that feels new and exciting. And I had felt like when I was making abstractions and making just anything really, I would repeat myself so often that I felt kind of stuck like in my habits. And
Yeah.
so initially pulling from chance based things was a way to kind of break out of the routine that I had.
S-
Basically, even just like a random where to start on a piece of paper or a canvas was different. I normally always start in the same spot, so this would be a new
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And I haven't even talked to you or haven't told you anything about the actual systems, which you keep asking about.
No, I
But
mean, dude, sometimes I have to ask the same question 6 times before someone answers it. So it's part of the
I
process.
refuse. No, I'm not trying to avoid it. I just think it's really interesting to sort of imagine to think about how these things relate and how they develop.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. In terms of I think it's so. Yeah, I started sort of more chance based, and then so I would kind of like it was mimicking Cage. But then I thought it just got kind of boring for me. Like I couldn't make anything super exciting, and so then I'd always been sort of like I kept track of my weight. I like would count certain things and like have things just in a notebook where I would like oh there's or I was really interested in the weather, or in like temperature prediction and things like that. And then I at one point thought I was at a residency and thought, well, what if I just instead of using the chance based stuff, why don't I utilize this information? And then it was like a light bulb went off. And then I felt like I could draw from any sort of thing that existed that generated like but initially just generated say numbers that would be equivalent to sort of the chance based stuff. And then
Hmm.
I would just sort of think like what would be interesting to draw. Would it be circles or squares, ovals? Would there be things like that? The first one of the earliest pieces I made, which it's tough to talk about without having it showing it, but I looked at like I was looking at artwork and thinking what do I like about certain pieces of art? And I would just write it down. It was really simple. I like certain colors. I like if it was like rubbed out, if, erased, if it was, and I would then I systematize those things. So I was like, and then I would just initially roll dice. And if I picked number two, I would like draw an oval. But then that would be chance based. But then if I picked like, my, I don't know, something personal like weight, then that was a certain weight on a certain date, that would also be an oval. So it was kind of a way to tap
Hmm.
into that source of information that felt like it was in conversation with that and giving form to that thing that sort of felt like I couldn't visualize it. Is that making
Yeah.
any sense or no? Or is it?
No,
Are
no, I'm
you?
totally
Yeah.
following you. Yeah, 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 100%. And it's fun. Wait, it's funny what you're saying about the chance because you were referred to me by a good friend of the show, Jovi Schnell, who also does some chance based stuff. I wonder if you guys have ever had a conversation about that. You don't have to talk about that, but it is interesting because it's interesting because you know. Um, I feel like you are getting into a conceptual space. So it's not
Hmm.
just abstraction, it's conceptual drawing, right? You're coming up with data sets and like a lot of when I was describing some of the challenges that I was having with the drawing is that with the drawings that I'm doing now is there's a system there, but there's a lot of decision making that's left on me, and I like
Hmm.
the idea of this decision making being sort of extracted from somewhere else, which differs a little bit from the work of Chana Horowitz, because she has systems, but I think a lot of the codification in her systems are arbitrary. Not, and that's that. I
Hmm.
mean, the work
Hmm.
is still super effective. That's not to
Hmm.
take away. That's just how the modality within which she works. But it is interesting. I think also I get the feeling we're both Gen X, right? So we are of a generation that is sort of becoming much more interested in data sets than maybe like the boomers were, where like
Yeah.
computerization is popping up, right? So it is very much of your time, like a representation of your experience as well. Um, I like the idea of this collection of data, right? Like, I might steal that. I'm not. I might steal the idea of taking notes about certain specific things and then apply them in my own way. But that is a really powerful way to sort of, because the one of the first things that people struggle with when they start learning how to draw is like, what the fuck am I going to draw?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is you can literally draw anything and it's a white page. So I like the games of chance that, like, because that Jovi has like, she has like, she's gamified her entire practice, which is amazing to
Hmm.
me. Not to speak of, I mean, I'm not speaking ill of someone that's not here, but
No,
I'm sure
that's very
she'll
cool. Yeah.
yeah, so she has like these games that she does the dice thing as well, and then she'll have like a color, and then she has to base everything around that color. And so like those initial decisions, like when you have everything open, and then you have to decide how to narrow it down, it is such
Hmm.
a task, like it, and it's exhausting. Like I look at some of my drawings, I'm like, I should have been finished with this in like one go, and I'm like, dude, like if I start quantifying every decision that I've had to make and then go back on to make it look the way that I intuitively want it to look,
Yeah.
like it's such
Yeah.
a it's a cross section between data sets and intuition and all these things, and like you know what you want it to look like, but you also know what you want, how you want to cheat it, and like it's
Yeah.
really interesting, especially with the like the constraints. Where I'm at is the constraints that I have are so specific that I can modulate them, and it's a lot of repetition, it's a lot of repeated drawings, right? And in
Huh.
relation to each other, there's like a rhythmic thing happening, because it's just the same repeating element in every piece, but it modulates in different ways, right? And that gives me a comfort of knowing what I'm going to draw.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Totally.
it
Yeah.
can
You
be
have that. Yeah.
entirely overwhelming. So yeah, I totally get the idea of like wanting to do this systemic thing. So like, can you give me some more examples? You said weight, like weight, weather, what other things are because I also like that they're oddly personal so far, and then also small talk, right? So like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
weather versus
You know what? That's really funny because the small talk stuff I do really like as well. Yeah. I think there's
yeah, yeah.
something, yeah, that's sort of things that
It's
feel mundane,
universal.
you know? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally. Yeah. And I'm always been interested in that sort of everyday kind of like something that comes out of a sort of thing that you don't pay attention to, you know? Um, yeah, I think there was a certain point at which, and I would, it'd be funny to mention how I met Jovi after, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but that, yes, I don't know. Yeah, I love her work though. So that's a cool thing. And I
I
love
love her as
the
a
game part of it.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love her as a person. She's so supportive. She's so nice. Like I've never met anybody that does it. Like, if you don't like Jovi, you got a problem.
Yeah, yeah. That's
and she's
funny. Yeah.
and I didn't really know how to paint these paintings that I'm doing now. She's the one that taught me how to layer, how to use acrylics in the right way. And then also, what was I going to say
Hmm.
about her too? There was one more thing. It'll come to me. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, like the that like when you go into her space, she's got all these colors that she's already mixed,
Huh.
and she's got like a little lid with a little painting of the color, with a little sticker with the color painted on, so can
That's
see it.
cool.
Then she
Yeah.
has a dice that has these numbers
Huh.
dice that correspond to colors and stuff like that. It really, like, you get in there and you're like, oh man, you're just having fun, dude. Like it's
Yeah.
not dour. It's like it's how to keep excited in your own practice. So I
Yeah.
really, but so what how were you playing with chance? Dice, you said starting in different parts of the page. Would you just drop the pencil on the page kind of thing?
Oh, that would have been no. Sometimes maybe I did do that. I think it would dice. I maybe use dice, and then I had a random number generator, so I would do that.
Oh,
Now
nice.
it's like I used to have this little pocket dictionary, which you don't need anymore, but I would always use it to, and I had a little random number thing on it, so I would sometimes use that, or yeah, I would use dice or any other sort of way in which I could kind of get that information. Also, I would use it a lot to sort of find language because it would all like often what I would do then is at a certain point I took like I would sort of encode the numbers that I generated into letters, and then I would feed them into this dictionary, and then it would like try to find a word that it thought you were looking for. Like that was back in the
Wow.
what late '90s. So, um, and it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it as a generational thing, but yeah, I mean, I remember as a kid getting one of the first, like it was a Texas Instruments computer, and being like writing code to generate random, well, it was lottery. I thought they were lottery numbers, but I thought like I was trying to come up with a system that would generate numbers that my family could win the lottery with. And I
Mhm.
thought because I was making the thing, it was imbued with something personal and more unique, but we never won, unfortunately. Or I wouldn't have had student loans, as I talked to you about. Yeah, in terms of like this, so then it changed a lot. So then I began to kind of sort of try to tap into a lot of different. Some of it was really personal, and then some things would be external. So like this kind of weird gridded one behind you is a
Mhm.
drawing. I'm revisiting that idea of I've recorded my weight for 30 years, I think, probably. So I have like all this just scraps pieces of paper. So I've been sort of translating that into something like daily. The new ones that I'm working on, one of them is about, I was reading this there was like this study back from like, I think it was in the 90s, and there was a interesting correlation between the activity of neurons in the brain and the way that when they begin to kind of transform, almost like a phase transition in the brain through the behavior of neurons. That's that connection to like the way earthquakes actually form or begin to kind of like actually occur. So that transition was simple, interesting correlation between those things. So this drawing, I'm sort of taking data from earthquakes and data from wars as well, and then other things sort of from like emotional parts, like sort of these like very strong emotions, and then sort of thinking about how that information could kind of how it relates and maybe could come together. No idea where that'll lead, but I'm sort of putting it out at this point. And this large one over here, another one is about I was thinking about sort of evolution of and development of consciousness. That would be kind of interesting. Sort of how something a simple kind of organism becomes more complex, and then somehow connecting that to like artificial intelligence, and then sort of reverse evolution in a way, going from something that is very complex, but something that can then mimic something very simple. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not making
No,
any sense, but
no, I'm
yeah.
following you. I'm following you. Please stop apologizing. We are in the
Okay.
art.
Oh
We
yeah.
are in art nerd heaven, and
Yeah. Okay.
I
Good.
understand. I speak the language,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I
and the
feel like I was
audience.
like, what?
No,
And
no.
then
Well,
yeah.
what? Go ahead. Sorry.
Then this
I'll let you talk.
drawing, it's a little hard to see, but that one is that concept of sort of the ship of Theseus. The idea that if you well, the idea of there I was thinking is two bodies would sort of switch their body parts, and then even their organs and everything would kind of then move from one to the other, and then at a certain point, is that then a kind of new, is one figure the other figure, or is that figure the same still? There's this idea
Mhm.
that if a ship changes all of its parts over time, is it still the same ship, or is it a new thing? So
Is that the
that
Theseus?
that's the
What?
ship of Theseus concept. Yeah, so a ship
Uh,
gets all
I
its
didn't know.
parts eventually. Yeah, I love that idea that like if something is regenerated, or it's incrementally changed, is there a certain point at which it becomes something different, or does it remain the sort of thing it was at its outset? So I
Well, my
love that
mom just
idea. So
My mom just had a knee replacement surgery. So is she still my mom?
I think that's a question you got. That's for you to figure out. You could ask her that. Are you still my mom with
Yeah,
your
I use
knee?
well, we've been teasing her. I'm sure I'm the first person that's ever called a person after getting a knee replacement a bionic woman, but
Oh yeah,
we've been having that. I'm sure the nurses are just rolling their eyes because they hear that shit.
yeah,
They always have the clever son that's like, "Ha!
yeah,
I
yeah,
came
yeah,
up with
yeah.
this joke all by myself."
Oh my
Well,
gosh, I know. But
what
yeah,
listening? Sorry, go ahead. You have yeah.
no,
I'm
that
gonna let you talk.
idea, yeah, but that idea is, yeah, she has just her knee replaced. If she eventually gets all of her, her
Yeah.
entire body replaced, then I guess it's like the drawing, then, but it's
Well,
like that idea of like, I just am
so
fascinated by those transformations that happen kind of incrementally, and you don't even realize it's happened until it's already happened. So you realize it sort of in retrospect,
yeah.
something new is developed, and it's sort of similar in these drawings. There's like the earthquake in Wars drawing is like about a phase change, a certain point at which this behavior happened, and then it creates this transformation. And then same thing with the consciousness drawing, I guess.
Well, I love when conversations about drawing get philosophical because they don't often do. But
Yeah.
this is really fun. I have also heard that I think I don't know how accurate this is, and I don't know exactly what it is, but something in like every 7 years we have entirely
Oh,
new cells. Is that have you heard that before? So then,
yeah,
are
yeah,
we
yeah.
even the same people anymore? Although we carry all these memories, and we're like
I
one of the
know.
things that I'm working on right now on in therapy is sort of like recognizing that all the things that make me cringe about myself and stress me out and all the regrets are how I learn to become myself now instead of just being like I'm still that piece of shit that made that mistake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
But so
true.
you were
Yeah.
yeah, but you were saying something, and here's a question that I think is interesting about the weighing yourself or keeping track of your weight. By the nature of doing that, observing that, does that affect your weight? Like, do you become more aware of like, yo, I'm gaining some pounds? So like
Oh yeah.
it's drawing as a fitness diet regimen, which is
Yeah.
fascinating, like as a concept, like
Oh
you
man.
know it's
Yeah.
like it's like your treadmill, which is fascinating. So like how much has it fluctuated, if you don't mind me asking? Like what's the craziest fluctuation you've seen? Because I would love to
Yeah.
have data from my life to just look back and be like, oh, okay, I was depressed then.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, if I had correlated it to some emotional state, that would have been interesting. But
Yeah. Well, you have the data. You can always go back and be like, oh yeah, I she broke
that's
up with
true.
me then.
Yeah, my weight spiked or something. I was obsessed with it when I was a kid. I don't have that stuff because I was kind of pretty overweight, and yeah, I always felt like I didn't know how to control it. And I think
Mhm.
like I felt like it was just like my body sort of and mind doing something that I didn't understand. Like I couldn't help it but eat. And I remember this sort of tied into the work when I was in middle school. I thought I loved eating chips, and but I loved eating them so much that I didn't stop. I wouldn't stop. So I thought, well, when I come home from school, I'll like set a timer. So I'll
Mhm.
give myself like 3 minutes to eat chips. But of course, I do that, and immediately I'm shoveling them in my mouth as fast as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, yeah.
But like, and then I remember like, yeah, just so being obsessed with that kind of stuff and thinking about, yeah, how much, how the sort of body would process things. I got really into that and learning about it. But then, yeah, in terms of keeping track, like I didn't think initially I would use it in a drawing. Um,
Mhm.
I was just wanting to like know what I weighed, and it fluctuated. I mean, it fluctuated back in middle school because I remember I lost a ton of weight and I went into Spanish class, and the teacher made me stand up and was like, "Everybody, round of applause for John. He lost all this weight." And I was like, "Oh, I was feeling so great." And then like it slowly sort of came back.
That teacher would be canceled
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the sad thing was, I had her again for Spanish too, and I gained all the way back plus more. And I
uh,
saw her, and I went into the classroom, and I saw her look at me, and I know in her mind she was like, "Oh, that guy, he's like self control," and it felt like, yeah, there's something at work. But again, like that kind of gradual transformation, like it doesn't seem like much. pound here and there. And the next thing you know, I'm like, well, how did this happen? And you've
Yeah.
reverted back to that original state. So I don't know. It's fluctuated a ton even since then. And I don't know, this drawing. I just thought I wanted something that I could do every day that would not I wouldn't have to think too much about. Like just come in and take these numbers, fill it in a certain color. It's like stretching before you exercise or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't. It hasn't really. Since I've probably been doing it for so long, it hasn't affected too much of my like thinking about it. I've also like recorded myself talking in my sleep, which I didn't think I'd use in a drawing either, but eventually I had made some drawings from that. Yeah, what else? For a long time when I was younger, I counted the number of hairs that would fall out in the sink. So yeah, so I'm bald now. So there's
I
not
didn't
that
have the
much of an
heart.
issue.
I didn't have the heart, but I would look at my pillow and be like, "Oh shit, this is happening."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's like things about the body sort of changing is fascinating, and like the kind of I guess all of those things. And I haven't done that in a long time, but the hair stuff
Well, I mean, it's
maybe
been
was
long
still there.
gone for both of us for a while.
Yeah, I'm
It's a
much
drop.
happier without it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
I know. Unfortunately, it happens in your 20s when it
yeah,
really affects you, but then you get to a certain point, and then now you realize that all the men that manage to keep their hair are starting to lose it, and they're
yeah,
very self-conscious, and you're just like, I'm good, dude,
yeah, yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. I've been there for a while. Yeah,
I'm like, I'm handsome. I've met women,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah.
That's
Women
true.
like it, bud. Chill.
Yeah, and now I look like a lot of other guys.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
can blend into a crowd.
not to go too sidetracked, but
Yeah.
how big of an influence was because you're a little bit older than me, but what's it called? Jean-Luc Picard for me was an
Oh,
icon of this is gonna be okay.
yeah. No, I didn't
Because
actually think. Yeah, I don't know.
he was a sex icon, and he was in his 30s or something at the time. Well, no, I mean that's really fascinating. Do you mind transitioning a little bit
Yeah,
into like educating me a bit about like New York's art scene as we we've been going for a little while. We've got like maybe 10 more minutes before we're at an hour. We can go longer. I do have to take my mom to physical
no,
therapy,
yeah. So
so
that's yeah.
at some
She can
point.
wait.
No, I'm like,
Yeah,
dude, the Catholic guilt on making your mom take an Uber when she's got knee surgery to
yeah,
physical
of course.
therapy.
No, no,
Oof,
no.
that I've
Let's
not
keep it to
felt
an hour.
guilt.
That's good. Yeah,
But I mean, it just sucks because we are actually on a roll. But can you tell me a little bit? You know Good Naked, right? What's her name, Jacqueline Cedar? I've seen you guys interacting on Instagram, like
yeah. I
liking each
don't
other's
know her
posts.
personally though.
You don't know her
Yeah,
personally, okay?
no, no. Do you?
Um,
Yeah.
I interviewed her, but she
Oh,
was my first foray into like artist run versus because she's somewhere in between, of like she's definitely artist run, but she's
yeah,
also a commercial space that is deliberately commercial, which I really respect, and I learned a
yeah,
lot from her. What
yeah.
what
I like
is
what she's doing a lot. Really
no, her
cool. Yeah,
programming is amazing, and she
yeah.
liked one of my posts of one of my drawings, and I was like, "Yeah." I was all excited. I was like, "Oh, someone likes my stuff that has influence."
I
So
love
so
that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
like it's very validating when somebody that is selling people's work likes something that you do. So
yeah,
anyway, let's talk about your impressions of New York. What was the scene like, the art scene, especially in the 90s? I had
yeah.
do you know who John Plipchuk is? He's a Canadian artist, royal art.
Yeah, I know the name, but I don't know him. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he does. He did a lot of characters. So he was in the 90s is kind of when he got his start. And I'm just fascinated with that like 90s, early 2000s art scene because I don't I don't think I really that I mean that's like, I think 2022 is when I decided, okay, art, So
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
so pre all of that, it's not quite in my consciousness. So like, can you
Hmm.
tell us, like, can you lead us through what your impressions of the scene was? How is the artist? One of the things that I'm always curious about is like in the actual New York City proper, like how do artist run spaces function, and because it's so expensive to have
Yeah.
space, but like compared to LA is expensive, but dollar per square foot, it's just not comparable to how expensive New
Yeah.
York is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially, and so like for a living space, yeah, you can make cuts and like kind of live with us in a small space, but to actually like do a gallery in a space, it ends up being expensive. So like, what were people doing in the I imagine New York was cheaper back then too, right?
Yeah. Well, the gallery I show at, it's called Pierogi, and they,
Oh, nice.
yeah, so they're in
Is
Williamsburg.
it Williamsburg? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny when I
Polish?
first, yeah, yeah, they are not Polish, but they were in the neighborhood, so they were connecting to that. I didn't actually even put it together at the time when it first. I was like, oh yeah, that's why. But they used to serve pierogies and vodka at their openings, which was great. But yeah, so
Nice.
the people. So when I went to a residency called Skowhegan back in 2000.
Oh wow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then right when I got back was when, like I was describing, the sort of Williamsburg scene was really like a lot of artists were living there, and a lot of galleries were starting to pop up. And Pierogi was one that everyone was talking about, um, run by Joe Armourine and Susan Swenson. Joe is an artist, Susan's a writer, and Joe sort of started it, I think, in his apartment. And from what I remember, the real estate was like super cheap at the time.
Mhm.
They went in with a couple other people and bought an entire building,
Oh
and right in the
wow.
heart of us. It's like so smart that they did that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think he had shows in the, like sort of the hallway space of his friends, and then eventually opened up like the ground floor space. And their whole sort of ethos was of sort of supporting artists. They had flat files, which was really sort of, I hadn't seen it other place. So you could also make an appointment to go show your work to him. It wasn't like who you know. And then when artists were showing with them, or even eventually being represented by them, they would take, it was 35% or 40% rather than 50%, which was
Wow.
awesome. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
would do that, you know? Um, yeah. And I remember that there were, tons of artists in the area. I lived in Greenpoint with my friend at the time, which was right near Williamsburg. I remember walking over to Pierogi with my portfolio, and I remember it was the middle of summer, and I was like drenched with sweat, but just made an appointment through to show him some work. Um, and I'm still with them, and it's been 20 years or so. So
Wow.
yeah, they've expanded. They moved to the Lower East Side for a while, and I just had a show with them. They collaborated with somebody in Chelsea, so that was like a totally different feeling or a different scene, but it was also really interesting too. But once I think the real estate laws changed and everything started to go up, artists couldn't really afford to live there, moved out. Um, and
Mhm.
my wife and I moved to Queens, in part because of she was working in Westchester County. So Queens, that was anyway. It's all this. It was closer to the bridge, and also this neighborhood didn't have a lot of artists in it. It had more actors and like even comedians lived in the neighborhood. Yeah, which I didn't know any of them, but I mean, I wouldn't know anybody just probably on the street. Um, but it was cheaper than some of the other areas. So anyway, I think yeah, it just seems
But
like then that whole area sort of shifted, and Pierogi was one of the earliest galleries there, and then sort of moved. You should look at, Lauren Monk. I don't know if you've ever seen his work.
no, no. I'm always interested in referrals if you have any.
Yeah, because his work is really his paintings, and what he does is all about these sort of art movements and neighborhoods. He would be an interesting person for you to talk, because you can talk about his work, but also it's all
Yeah, yeah.
integrated. Which is I learn a lot from looking at his paintings, like all these connections, So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah. Anyway, now it seems like, yeah. So I guess being in Chelsea for the last show was interesting. There's tons of people coming in off the street, which was great. Um, and I don't know. We'll see next what happens next. But yeah, the back in the late '90s, early 2000s, it was a very different scene. It seemed like I mean, I was younger, but a lot of our friends lived in the same area, and so we would hang out at the same bars and restaurants, and felt like a
Well,
big place.
I just love the idea of a New York that was flooded with different people trying to make it. Like you have the it sounds like there's the artist comedian neighborhood, and
Yeah,
then sorry, the actor comedian neighborhood, and then you had left an artist neighborhood, which
I
like
know.
now I mean I can't imagine. It's probably really really hard. I remember I visited once. My friend Jessica Gispert was living there with my friend who's passed away. Rest in peace, Pabon. And it was like it was so fascinating. It was so interesting. And because I was in New York, I wasn't worried about driving and I got stupid drunk. Like I got
Yeah.
like, I was like, what the fuck was I thinking, you know? And I just ended up like not being able to find my way around. I lost my iPhone and stuff like that. But I just remember the vibe, the energy. This was, oh man, when was this? This was like 10 years ago, 12, 14 years ago. This was like
Yeah.
around 2010. So even then, it still had like kind of a buzz, kind of a feeling. Like it just felt exciting. I lived in Florence for a while, and it was the closest thing of like being able to walk around and like feeling empowered, feeling invincible. I guess is
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah.
But then also just being like, man, these apartments are small, dude. Like just
Oh
like,
yeah, that's true. But
but
also,
so
yeah,
that's
like yeah, I love that. Yeah, being able to kind of like, but also like openings. There's like tons of people on the street, and
yeah,
everybody is
yeah.
hanging out. I mean, I love that kind of that feeling
Yeah, yeah.
too. You know.
It sounds like it's much easier to get people traffic off the street. I'm going to ask the dumbest question an artist has asked on this podcast. Where is Chelsea? It's a neighborhood in Manhattan.
Yeah, it's in
Okay,
Manhattan on the
Upper West Side.
west
It's
west side. Yeah, around 20. So I think it spans from like say 16th Street up through maybe 28th or something. I mean, I'm sure it changes, but then it kind of moves out a little bit too. Most of the galleries are kind of clustered around that area on 10th Avenue.
mm,
So right near the sort of near the water, actually. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
That's
it's
interesting.
for me. It's not. I have to drive I could take the train, but I have to drive in the city now. So, but it's actually very easy from here. So,
Yeah, yeah.
in case you were
It,
wondering.
no, no. It's interesting. I mean, I just geographically, it's kind of hard to. So where is the Upper West Side? So this is on the West Side, and the Upper West Side is considered the ritzy part of New York, of Manhattan. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Upper West Side has a lot of really nice, yeah, wealthier areas and things. Yeah. So,
Is Upper East Side more or less wealthy?
I don't know. It's a good
Okay,
question. I'm not
but
great when it
upper
comes to real estate. Yeah, the upper parts seem to be more like, but
more.
Chelsea's got a lot of money in it too, though now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't
No, I
know.
would. I mean, I'm just trying to see how adjacent it is,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to like where because it's obviously not going to be in the most expensive part, but if it's just right there, it serves the community, right? Of
yeah. And
like
when I
people.
first came to New York, Chelsea was more still like not a lot of galleries in the neighborhood, which was really interesting. I mean, there were some. There were like when I was in graduate school. That was late '90s. There, we would go to Chelsea, but it wasn't what it is now. It built up
Mm,
so rapidly into this, really sort of densely packed areas full of galleries. And now the galleries there generally are more sort of high end. There aren't like the smaller places that you'd find in say Chinatown or Lower East Side or Tribeca.
mm.
Um, which there you
So
see
that's
like what sort of like pierogi was back in the late '90s, early 2000s. Like other galleries are sort of popping up in other places.
yeah. So then that's more like Gagosian, Zwerner's, or I
Yeah,
think Zwerner has like two in Chelsea, right? I
yeah,
think. Yeah, yeah.
Gagosian, yeah, and then yeah, there's a
So
bunch
that's
of them that have yeah.
I wonder if there is a place other than Chelsea that has more uh high end like mega galleries per square foot because I can't imagine, like whatever. I think the top 5 cities are obviously New York, LA, um Hong Kong, Paris, and I always forget the last one. But the top 5 art markets are those. I wonder. I kind of get the impression New York is number one
Mm,
these days, but I could be wrong. Comment down below if anybody actually watching this knows which would be, you know. But it's interesting to me that it seems like New York has traditionally been something that has like I would say artists there are low income artists that are successful and whatnot, like people that start off poor. But I would say generally, my experience, at least doing the show, is that there's a lot of middle class people that are artists. Right? You need
mm,
to at least have some time and some resources to really be able to explore this kind of labor that may not end up, like going back to what we were saying, how am I going to make art monetize
hmm
art, like that's literally how we started this conversation. um so it's interesting to me to think about New York because LA still, I think there's still place for people in LA that are not, that maybe grew up middle class and now are working class, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I don't think that there's like, my understanding of how New York is now is just that there's like really really poor people and really really rich people, kind of
Hmm.
by design, right? I don't
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
I don't know how accurate that is. Obviously, I'm coming from LA. I've spent very little time in New York, but it's almost interesting where it's become like it just traditionally, like I referenced the Velvet Underground. Like there was a time where New York was like a gritty art uh, community that I
Hmm.
think maybe doesn't exist so much anymore, and I wonder what that does to the city. Does it make it more prestigious, right? That there is no riffraff, or that there's less riffraff art going
Yeah.
on versus like because then it is exclusively for the rich people that live in the city. I don't know.
Hmm.
This is all
Hmm.
speculative, and I'm obviously full of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just asking questions, bro.
I know. I know. I don't know either necessarily. I mean, yeah, I think the question of like, how do you, like a lot of people that I say maybe went to graduate school with would probably have more means than I would have thought maybe. But and if you don't have to work a job, say you don't have to put that time into a job, you can make your own work and you can go around and see
Yeah,
shows and you can do other things. So, you know, um, yeah, and even where I teach, a lot of students come from families that would be exposed to art more, so they're used to looking at
mm,
it and talking about it and thinking about it. Whereas that was not the case for me growing up. But we were a working class family, and I worked. But I loved the idea that it was like this other world that I could be a part of, and I loved making work. But in terms of like how the galleries are structured, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it does get kind of codified. Like certain neighborhoods become a particular type of work, and then it changes the sort of economics of that neighborhood. And then, I mean, I think there's still places where artists are like you were describing, some artist-run spaces and things like that. But I'm not as like connected to that as I was back when I first came to the city or was
mm.
first there,
No, which is
because
fair.
yeah, now I have a sort of family and live out here.
But
But
we
it
got to
felt
dream.
like, yeah, yeah,
We got
it
to
felt
live
like
the
what.
fantasy. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I say it felt like the Brooklyn scene, Williamsburg scene was. It felt like that to me at the time. Like a lot of people that were living there, making work and hanging out. It felt like a more of a community than I. But when I moved out, like you described, and that was just then I sort of felt separated from it.
Yeah, yeah,
But I don't know. I'm sure there are more things happening that for younger artists that I'm not as aware of.
yeah. There's always hunger for sure.
Yeah,
Uh, and
but I
and
think
you
you're
and
right
people.
though. Yeah.
And where there's a will, there's definitely a way. I don't want to erase like all the stuff that's going on there, but I would say I guess what we got from you was an idea of what it was like, which is like it still sounds like it was pretty exciting in the early aughts, late 2000s, which is kind of how you remember when like Real World San Francisco came out and
Oh
like
yeah,
San
yeah,
Francisco
totally.
San Francisco became really popular, and now you look at it now and you're like, what's going on there, dude? Like most people are like it just seems like it doesn't have the same like ooh San Francisco vibe as it used to. I'm
Mm.
not going to speak to it, and obviously you always hear inflated crime reports when you're not in a city, so I want to account for that. But it doesn't seem like I haven't wanted to go to San Francisco for a very long time.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
or and it used to be a city that I wanted to live in. And New York
Mm.
too. New York used to be, and
Hmm.
now I'm just like I'm already in LA. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
and I understand this scene. I understand how this works. Luckily, LA is becoming bigger, and I wonder if that is a side effect of New York being kind of inaccessible for some people, right? Like
Maybe.
because
Yeah.
if I someone from Miami, my choices were, and everybody, this was the pipeline. Because over here, I just did an interview with somebody, and still Fred Snitzer Gallery and Emerson Dorsch are kind of the top of the game. There are no Gagosians, there are no mega galleries down here. They come for the art fair, so they
Fair.
don't
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, that's when the money comes anyway. So they
Hmm.
only have to
Hmm.
be here for part of the year. So to some degree, there's a ceiling here, that's not to like in terms of like the community, the art community is very small comparatively to like Los Angeles and Miami or and New York. And to some degree you have to decide like, okay, am I going to stay here and be part of this community, or am I going to go into a bigger pond where
Yeah.
there's more niches? And I don't know. I mean, it just seems like really hard to decide to go to New York versus LA. The rent is about the same as Miami right now.
Is
I
it?
can't
Wow.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
mean, Miami's really fucking expensive right
Yeah.
now. So, because
Huh.
partly because a lot of people left New York during COVID,
Yeah.
you know, and bought a lot
Yeah.
of property.
It's interesting.
So,
So to go back to like when I first met Jovi, which I didn't get, but I was interning at a gallery that was like it was her gallery in Chelsea, and it was
mhm,
early on in that neighborhood's sort of like I think galleries were popping up, but they were this gallery was just starting. It was just like the guy that ran it, and then I was an intern,
mhm,
and it had like I don't know what floor, third floor of a building, but doing super cool. They're still going, but doing really exciting stuff. But I remember feeling like, yeah, this person is really excited about the artists and about the work, and is experimenting a lot. And they were that was in Chelsea, where I imagine still it was probably expensive, but I don't see you being able to do that now. You know,
yeah, yeah. No, for sure, for sure.
but
So
yeah.
yeah, so I wonder if the inaccessibility or the expense of living in New York has made, because it's palpable in LA
Mhm.
from 2012 to now. This year they're doing a Pacific Standard Time again, but I remember Pacific Standard Time being sort of like the moment that Los Angeles planted its flag and said, and
Mhm.
are you familiar with Pacific Standard Time? It was
No,
basically,
no.
okay, for people that don't know and are not from LA, LA decided in 2012 that they were going to, like I said, plant a flag and claim and lay claim to the people that, to the art scene that happened in the 60s that was mostly overshadowed by the New York scene. So they were doing a lot of Chris Burden stuff. There was a lot of, you know, like all the artists that were around that generation that were here got their due, and it was almost like an educational project for people to recognize what was happening in Los Angeles. And since then, like that
Mm.
to me is the marking point. I also wasn't really that well connected in the art world at the time, but from that point, so it might just be my perception because now I'm more plugged into the scene since then. But I've talked to other people. I'm not the only one that feels like that was a turning point in LA's identity as an art city. And now we have Hauser and Wirth's, you know, now we have the big, I don't know how long Hauser and Wirth has been out there actually. So I don't want to use them as an example, but a lot of the big mega galleries are starting to establish themselves there. And I wonder if it is like, I wonder what it is about that transition, you know, like I maybe there's no correlation, maybe there's no causation, it's
Mhm.
just happenstance. But I do feel like New York, like I would imagine that if I was living in Miami right now, when like the same way that I was in 2008 when I made the decision to move out to LA, I think the decision's easier now to choose
Mhm.
LA,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
because it's like it seems like just New York is very, very you know, you hear people talk about how New York is oppressive, and LA can be too. I don't want to be like, you know, I don't want to pretend like I come to Miami and I'm relaxed. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
like last time I came here, I was like, wow, I feel really relaxed and all of that. And then I flew back to LA, and within an hour of being like of taking a walk, you know, within one phone call with my mom telling her, hey, I'm back and all of that, I saw someone smoking crack, I saw human feces on the street, and I heard the ever-present helicopters over
Oh
me.
wow.
And
Huh.
you don't realize what it's like because it's always there, but when you leave and there's no helicopters. I haven't seen a single helicopter here in Miami,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
and so that surveillance, all of those little things, like that is how LA is oppressive in a different way than New York. So I don't want to
Mhm.
say that like
Mhm.
LA good, New York bad. LA has a lot
Mhm.
of problems, you know, which I'm sure New York does as well, but it still seems easier by comparison. You know, it
Yeah.
still seems like an easier life. You've got more space if you're an artist. You know, I'm not trying to flood the market with new artists in LA, but I'm just seeing like on a cost benefit analysis, it just seems like
Mm.
you know, like and a lot of artists that so far a lot of uh Becky Brown, who's represented by
Oh yeah, she's in the show that I just co-curated. Yeah,
oh, so you know Becky. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm
I didn't cut you
interested.
off, but yeah,
No, yeah, I'm interested in having her on, but she lives in Buffalo, so it seems like it's harder to live in New York City proper, even in the boroughs, than it
yeah,
is now. Completely based on anecdotal information that I have that may not be accurate, but
yeah. Well,
but
yeah,
I
our rent was sky high. That's why we moved out of the city and bought a place up here. You know, it was just
yeah,
for less than we were renting. I mean,
wow,
I love the city. I love I've been going in more often since my son's a little older, and I still love the amount of things that you can do and see. But yeah, in terms of like how to live, I don't know. I don't want to speak for anybody else. For me, it was just for us, it was like a little too hard to manage and continue. So yeah, we had like when we first moved to Queens, we had a great deal with a guy who owned a house. We rented the second floor. The rent didn't change for the entire 10, 12 years we were there. So it was like great. But
wow,
once we had to move out, then we were sort of hit with like sky high rents, and then just thought, can't keep doing this forever.
no,
Um, but being up here is yeah, there's still a community of people that are there. I think having Instagram and other things, you can kind of connect and see what people are doing more than maybe when I first came up here. But yeah, I do miss the community part of it that we had back in the early
yeah,
2000s.
yeah.
Say, but I don't know. I love it up here now. Actually, it took a little while, but I do. Being outside the city is something really nice. So if you're ever out here, I'd love to
Oh
have you
yeah,
come
for
by.
sure.
Yeah, that'd be
For
fun.
sure, for sure. No,
Um,
I'm definitely looking to come to New York, and this is how I learn. So the what's my thesis is what's my thesis because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
yeah,
So
I love it. Yeah.
what I do is I say a lot of shit that's wrong, and then someone corrects me eventually.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I accidentally spread misinformation about New York. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, I don't know.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, you may be right. I'm not and I don't know what LA's what it's like to be there either. So it's
no,
difficult for me to know. But
it's tough. It's hard work. Like people grind. It's
hmm.
and I think that people have this idea of LA because of the movie business and all of that, but
Yeah,
like on the ground level, there's a lot of people like just living paycheck to paycheck and having art practices,
yeah,
which I
yeah,
got mad respect for, because
yeah.
but to me, I feel like New York is kind of the thing. Like I wouldn't want to be a chef now. Like it's a
Uh-huh.
young man. You have to
Yeah,
get into being a chef when you're young, and then you become
yeah,
Anthony Bourdain. You don't
yeah.
go at his age as an old 40-year-old man and start
Sounds
working in the
brutal.
kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna kill you. So I don't know. I think that like maybe you know it was lovely and it was so inspiring and so great and all of that, but I think on a day-to-day basis people are like very very like New Yorkers are very
Yeah.
that attitude of like like I thought Miami was East Coast and I was like no. Boston and New York are true East Coast where it's like
Yeah.
there's an abrasiveness that you have to sort of survive the city, whereas LA is like everybody seems chill, but everybody's struggling.
Uh-huh.
People,
Wow, interesting.
people,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
people are suffering, and they're just pretending like they're not. But if you get down underneath, you're like, I know how I'm gonna make rent. The
Yeah.
only reason I'm still the only reason that I'm still there is because my rent is so fucking cheap from rent control because I
Oh,
just wouldn't.
nice.
I would not be able to afford it at the rates that rent is going there. I wouldn't be able to afford like my lifestyle here in Miami, either. Because the rents are like insane. So,
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
I lucked out. I very much lucked out on that. I mean, there's a warning that I might get lead poisoning, but it's a trade off.
That's good. You're willing to live with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully
As,
not.
as
Oh, yeah.
as long as I don't lick the paint on the walls, I should be fine.
Yeah, that's good. Don't do that. Definitely. I would not. Yeah.
Well,
Your
cool,
interviews would
man.
be a lot different if you started doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, my social awareness will die. Well, this has
Yeah.
been great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. and schooling me. I really love talking about drawing, as you can tell, and
Yeah.
conceptual drawing is very fun. Not a lot of people talk about it, um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I'd like to keep in touch. Would love to share more
yeah, yeah,
stuff, and yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
for
But yeah, it
sure,
was
for
a lot
sure.
of fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of fun
Thanks,
talking.
man. What can we anything that we can promote for you? Usually, this would be when I ask the question that could possibly make it last for an extra half hour to an hour.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah. No.
but I got to take my mom. Did anything that we left out? Anything that I didn't ask you that you maybe wanted to say? Any advice for artists? You are an educator.
Oh yeah, my gosh. No, no, nothing. I thought it was great. I love talking
All
about
right, cool,
drawing too. And then,
cool.
yeah, just I don't know,
Yeah,
advice. I think we gave a
you don't
lot.
have to. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah,
have to. Well, cool. Yeah, man. I definitely want to keep in touch, and maybe we'll do like a virtual studio visit now that we know
yeah.
that
Let's do that.
that StreamYard works for this. So,
Yeah, I've never
cool.
used this
Well,
before, so it was cool. Yeah,
it's pretty handy and it's high res.
yeah.
So and it gives me two copies. So it's going to be 1080p, and it's not going to be
Wow.
this gallery view that we have. So
Oh,
anyway,
awesome. Okay, great.
cool. Cool. Cam, anything that we can promote for you? Anything coming up? What's your Instagram?
Oh,
It's JJ
yeah, it's J, JJAYOSEA.
at JJAYS.
OSEA. So my
Oh, S.
initials are, it's my name's John Jerome O'Connor, so JJOC. And I couldn't
Mm.
get, John O'Connor anywhere. So someone had once said that to me, spelled it JJOC, JJAYOSEA. So I just like, oh, I'll make that as the but no one, just half the people don't know it's me. So but
Well,
anyway,
cool.
yeah,
And
no, there's nothing really to promote. Yeah, nothing in particular. Just
all right, cool, man. Well, good
making work.
talking to you.
So
Have a good rest of your day. We're actually in the same time zone this time with
oh yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah.
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 And you too, and I hope it all goes well with your mom's recovery and everything too. So
Yeah, I'm working her hard. I'm
yeah,
I'm making her
sounds
do
like
her
it.
exercise. I'm here as a coach, and
Oh,
I'm a
that's
no
good.
nonsense coach.
Are you there
Cool,
for a
man.
while, or are you? Oh, wait, you
I
gotta go take. You gotta take her. So I'll
No,
let
no,
you
it's
go.
all good. Here,
Yeah.
let me end the recording. Well, hold on. Well, cool. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed the conversation, like, subscribe, rate us 5 stars on whatever audio podcasting platform you listen on, and share us with people, man. If that really helps us a lot. If you enjoyed this conversation, please let other people that draw and are nerdy about drawing know that there's this conversation out here, because you know
Yeah.
the content needs to find people.
Yeah.
I'm
Definitely.
finding.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related.